it says Avi Lewis. I'll get into that in a second. But I'd rather see Naomi Klein run myself. Avi Lewis is Naomi Klein's husband. And frankly, I'd say she's probably the smart money at this point. The leadership convention is in 2018. That would set up an election between Naomi Klein and Justin Trudeau for 2019. You still want to move to Canada? Do you want to move to Canada more? This is a article that Naomi Klein wrote right after the last election in Canada. And it's critical of the new Prime Minister. Cautiously so. Not brutally critical, but realistically cautious. And I think it's a fairly well-written article. You should probably give it a read. But here's the thing. Naomi Klein is a partisan hack. Well, at least she is in Canada, anyways. Because she's married to the scion of the NDP ruling class. She is the Hatfield to Trudeau's McCoy. So who is Avi Lewis? Well, Avi Lewis is the son of Stephen Lewis, who is the son of David Lewis. Stephen Lewis was at one point the leader of the Ontario NDP. He was also an ambassador to the United Nations. And has a bit of a resume attached to that. His father was the leader of the NDP at about the same time as Justin Trudeau's father was the Prime Minister and leader of the Liberals. So you can see the interesting level of, what's what I'm looking for here, congruency aligning itself there. When Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister, his prime collaborator and prime competitor was simultaneously David Lewis. And thus there was a congruency in setting up Avi Lewis as the competitor and collaborator to the young Dauphin, Justin Trudeau. This is maybe not a narrative that anybody really wants, but I mean, not in the real world, anyways. But it's a fun narrative in the world of make believe, anyways. Right. So, the leader of the NDP, as I mentioned yesterday, was given the boot. He was a disaster, and so tongues ought to be wagging about the possibility of Avi Lewis, but I think that his wife, who is none other than Naomi Klein, would be a better candidate, and I think that just about everybody would agree with that. Which is not to take anything away from Avi Lewis particularly. He worked as a talk show host in Canada for a little while. I used to watch his show sometimes. He's not Naomi Klein, right? Naomi Klein is almost singular. Canadian Noam Chomsky, essentially, right? And when you have that opportunity, it's hard to kind of want to settle for Avi Lewis, right? It's not that it's less about downplaying the importance of Avi Lewis, or I think Avi Lewis has been pretty clear that he doesn't want the job to begin with, right? although even if there's that kind of pull, right? Um, he's really he's really spent his life running away from that, right? I think maybe it's Naomi Klein that's maybe um, had a life trajectory that's brought her more in line with this. But I mean, it's not about saying that Abby Lewis would be a bad candidate. It's more about saying that Naomi Klein is um, uh, an excellent candidate. Um, Her name recognition would be tremendous, and I think that her positions are fairly clear. There's not a lot of ambiguity. If Canada, if the Canadian left wants to get over this sort of blasé string of mediocre, um, if it wants to refocus itself, it couldn't go wrong by electing Naomi Klein. Um, I think that we got some convincing to do, but it's going to at the very least give the left a clear choice, which is something that it has not had in a very long time. About 20, more than 20 years, right? So she is a partisan hack in Canada. There's no question. She might deny it, but there's no question. She is the Hatfield to Trudeau's McCoy. But she makes some good points too. I posted enough here over the last few days to get my point across. Trudeau is and that refers to all of the posts from the last election cycle that I had thrown up as I was archiving. They're all gone now. They'll come up in time on my own page. Trudeau is in truth a very pretty spokesperson. In that sense, he's more like Reagan than he is like Kennedy. He knows enough about what is happening to avoid looking foolish most of the time. And he'll pass any beer test you throw at him with flying colors, but he's a front person for a party establishment with very deep roots in the country. And no, he's really not as liberal as you'd like to think. But as far as lesser evils go, the Liberals broadly, not just Trudeau, are head and shoulders above anything else on offer, okay? They are a lesser evil, unambiguously. They do work for the banks. But, see, here's one example. You can look at healthcare. History is complicated, of course. But if you ask the Liberals, they'll tell you that they continue to support public healthcare because they see it as providing the country with a competitive advantage in labor costs. The end result is universal health care, and we're all very attached to it. But if you listen to them carefully, it comes down to a pro-business policy. It's the same thing with the indexing of the minimum wage. It's very progressive and everything, but if you listen to them talk, what they will tell you is that it's meant to drive aggregate demand. So yes, they will consistently come down on the progressive side of things, but it's more because they're driven by numbers than anything else. Except when they don't, like pipelines. So it's always a lesser evil. But despite being a lesser evil, the reality is that in practice they're more comparable to the Green Party than the Democrats. So you need to pull her back a little. But the thing is this. This may be a launching speech. And so that may be the next election. Justin Trudeau versus Naomi Klein. And some conservative will no doubt also run. For what it's worth, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. You vote for Naomi Klein. If the NDP comes up with some lesser peon, it may not be the case. But obviously, somewhat of an exciting moment, and somewhat of an exciting couple of years. There no doubt will be much pressure on her to run. We'll see how that works out.